Alright, let me ask you something. What if I told you one of the greatest pilots in aviation history didn't just learn to fly, she invented herself first? Not metaphorically. I mean, she literally erased her past, chose a new name, built a cosmetics empire from nothing, bullied her way into military aviation, outran most of the men of her era, and then broke the sound barrier just to prove she could. And somehow, that's only half the story. Alright, drink your coffee, because today we're diving into the unbelievable life of Jacqueline Cochran, the aviatrix who came from sawdust roads, and decided she belonged amongst the stars. I'm Bill, and this is Buffalo Air Park. Let's dive in. Before she was Jacqueline Cochran, she was Bessie Lee Pittman, born around 1906 in a desperately poor town in the Florida Panhandle. And when I say poor, I don't mean struggling. I mean no shoes until she was 8 years old. She slept on pallets, wore dresses made from flour sacks, and left school around age 9 to work in a cotton mill, earning a few cents an hour. At one point, as a child, she even helped deliver a neighbor's baby because no doctor was available. That was her starting line. Later in life, she would describe her journey as going from sawdust to stardust. And honestly, that may be the most accurate autobiography ever written in 5 words. But here's where things get complicated. As an adult, Jackie told the press she was an orphan. She claimed the Pittmans weren't her real family. She said she chose the name Jacqueline Cochran from a phone book because it had the right ring to it. The truth was far messier. She had married at 14. She had a son who tragically died at age 5. Then she divorced, kept the last name, buried the past, and reinvented herself completely. Even close friends believed the orphan story. She didn't just start a new life. She rewrote the script. By the early 1930s, she landed in New York City working at a salon inside Saks Fifth Avenue. She was ambitious, charming, and relentless, and that's where she met millionaire Floyd Oldham. When she told him she wanted to launch her own cosmetics company, he gave her simple advice. If you want to sell nationwide, you need to travel. His suggestion? Get some wings. Jackie took that literally. She bet him she could earn her pilot's license in a matter of weeks, despite having little formal education and struggling with reading and writing. She even convinced instructors to allow parts of her testing orally. 3 weeks later, she had her license. She later said, "When I paid for my first lesson, a beauty operator ceased to exist and an aviator was born." And just like that, aviation gained one of its fiercest competitors. Her cosmetics company, Wings to Beauty, became airborne marketing before marketing was even a concept. She flew herself across the country selling makeup. She created skincare, specifically for high-altitude flying because cockpit air dried her skin. Marilyn Monroe would later endorse her products, and yes, she reportedly refused to step out of an airplane without fixing her hair first. Because Jackie Cochran believed something radical for the time. You could be glamorous and absolutely fearless. By the late 1930s, she wasn't just flying, she was winning. In 1938, she entered the Bendix Trophy race, a brutal transcontinental sprint, and beat 9 male pilots. But the headline doesn't tell the real story. At 20,000 feet, her engine began starving for fuel. Oxygen systems were primitive. She was literally biting down on an oxygen tube while wrestling the aircraft. To keep fuel flowing, she banked the airplane side to side repeatedly, forcing the last drops into the engine. She didn't nurse the airplane home. She dragged it across the country by sheer willpower, and still won. When World War II began, Jackie decided she belonged in it. She ferried a bomber across the Atlantic, becoming the first woman to do so, despite male pilots threatening to strike over it. The aircraft she received had broken equipment and missing tools, so she bought her own wrench and went anyway. In England, flying for the Air Transport Auxiliary, she became legendary, partly for her skill, and partly for arriving at muddy wartime airfields in a chauffeur-driven Rolls-Royce wearing a mink coat. It wasn't vanity. It was a statement. You didn't have to stop being yourself to survive aviation. Back in the United States, Jackie pushed General Hap Arnold relentlessly until he authorized the Women Airforce Service Pilots, the WASPs. She ran the program with iron discipline. Trainees called it Cochran's Convent. Over 1,000 women flew nearly every aircraft in the Army inventory. They towed targets while live ammunition was fired at them. They tested aircraft, delivered airplanes, logged roughly 60 million miles. Some even faced sabotage, sugar in the fuel tanks, damaged parachutes, from men who felt threatened. And yet they proved something undeniable. Skill had nothing to do with gender. Still, in 1944, the program was shut down amid political pressure. Doors opened and slammed shut at the same time. After the war, Jackie refused to slow down. She became close friends with Chuck Yeager. In 1953, denied a U.S. jet, she borrowed a Canadian Sabre and became the first woman to break the sound barrier, with Yeager flying chase. The control tower didn't hear the sonic boom clearly, so she went back up later the same day, and did it again, because ambiguity is not part of her vocabulary. Later, at age 58, she would fly at Mach 2. Now here's where the story turns uncomfortable. In the 1960s, a group later called the Mercury 13, women who passed astronaut testing, sought NASA inclusion. Jackie initially supported testing, but when Congress debated sending women into space, she testified against expanding the program, arguing it wasn't practical. Many historians believe ambition played a role. If she couldn't be first, she didn't want anyone else to claim that sky. It's the contradiction at the heart of her story. She broke barriers for women in aviation, and then helped reinforce one in space. History rarely gives us simple heroes. When Jacqueline Cochran died in 1980, she held more speed, altitude, and distance records than any pilot, male or female, in history. She requested to be buried with two objects: a childhood doll she once lost during poverty, and a ceremonial sword from the Air Force Academy. She reportedly said the sword was in case she needed it to fight her way out of hell. And honestly, after everything she survived, I wouldn't bet against her either. Jacqueline Cochran didn't just fly airplanes. She flew away from who she had been and toward who she decided to become. From cotton mills to Mach numbers, from sawdust roads to supersonic skies. And whether you admire her, question her, or struggle to reconcile both, you can't deny one thing: she changed aviation forever. And that wraps up another tale from aviation's stranger side. Until next time, keep your eyes on the skies.